And there was another driver who actually posted another good finish this week. That's Dave Blaney. He actually got in the top 10. His in ninth place he came home on Sunday, and that was his second top 10 in the last 3 weeks. He also had a ninth place run at Darlington. Other than that, he hasn't had that great of a season, but it's always good to see drivers like that have good runs, as Dave Blaney came home with that ninth. As we also see Juan Pablo Montoya had a pretty good run for the he finished in 12th. Brian Vickers, another top 15 finish, as well as David Reagan. Reagan not a spectacular finish this week, but he did get a top 15, and it's those finishes that can win championships. I know with this championship format, it's a little bit different. You don't have to be as consistent all throughout the season, which is something I really don't agree with. But to get into the chase, you definitely have to be consistent. A lot of top 15s will help, and David Reagan's been certainly posting a lot of those this season. He got obviously 15th this week, 12th the week before, 5th the week before that. Most of the time, more often than not, he's within at least the top 15, and I think that can get him into the chase.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And Jamie McMurray and some of these other drivers had just excellent runs as well.
Welcome back, listeners, to part two of our discussion on this past weekend's Best Buy 400 Sprint Cup race and all the other happenings at the Dover International Speedway. And Brock, we were just touching base on all the underdogs really that had great runs at Dover in the Best Buy 400 this weekend, guys like Travis Kvapil, David Reagan, Dave Blaney. But Saturday in the Nationwide Series race, there was a bit of controversy surrounding the guy that is arguably the hottest driver in all three circuits right now, Kyle Busch, when he got into a little bit of a late race skirmish with teammate with his teammate.
Yeah, definitely.
Jason Leffler.
With Jason Leffler, definitely. When it came down to the end of it, just some contact was made, and then some words were exchanged, and neither were too pleasant when it all came down to it. Certainly, the word idiot was thrown around, I believe, and certainly not the kind of relationship you want to have between teammates. The way that the way that wreck shook out. And what's your take on how Kyle Busch is just kind of? You mentioned that he is definitely the hottest driver on the circuit. Do you think that perhaps that's definitely gotten into his head a little bit too much?
I think it's kind of gotten into his head because just the way he conducted himself in his interview after the accident with Dave Burns from ESPN. He was asked on his opinion on what happened in the accident, and Kyle had been having a great race beforehand. I believe they were battling for 8th place at the time, but Kyle had a much better car than that. He had started third in the race and led 68 laps of the 168 that he had been driving in. And when he was asked how it went down, he said, well, it seems like I have a teammate who can't stand to be number 2, so he wrecked me. And afterwards when Jason Leffler was interviewed, he took total blame and he apologized up and down for what happened. But, which obviously it happens. Jason Leffler got loose under Kyle Busch. Dover's definitely a track you get air loose. And he got up into Kyle and they crashed. It happens. It's Dover. But I think Kyle Busch really needs to get his head out of his, and kind of think realistically here. I just don't think people do that these days anymore, and because you could be under heavy fines from NASCAR, and I think Kyle Busch just really needs to think before he opens his mouth sometimes. He's a great driver. I'm not a big fan of Kyle Busch, but I will give him respect that he is a great driver in the series. You obviously don't win all these races by just not being a great driver, but I think he needs to keep his emotions in check on a few times. It's great to see some of the color back in NASCAR, but comments like that are just not called for.
No, I agree. I agree. So I mean, it was it's unfortunate that after that he would have such an incident happen this year. Certainly, he has just kind of rewritten the record book on some in some ways of his dominance in the top three divisions. And really, that's one other thing that we were thinking about also as well. Certainly, changes in the air. Certainly with Kyle Busch being one of the new dominant drivers. What we were also discussing about the recent mentions of Kentucky perhaps getting a race date into NASCAR. And what was your thought on that subject?
Well, yes, as you were saying, Kentucky Speedway, there's a lot of rumors. The rumors have been circling. It's not a brand new thing. The rumors have been circling around for actually a few years now, but it seems like they're stronger more than ever now. And it seems there's a lot of buzz about possibly New Hampshire or Dover or maybe one of the Pocono races losing a date or possibly even losing both dates to in favor of races at Kentucky. Now, Kentucky Speedway in its own right, I believe, is a good racetrack. IRL hosts races there. I believe both the Nationwide and Truck Series race there. But, I think the last thing we need in the Sprint Cup Series is another mile and a half D-shaped, somewhat flat oval.
Oh, absolutely. It seems like NASCAR is kind of sending mixed messages here about wanting diversity in certain things in terms of like getting these open wheel drivers into the circuit and trying to get them to express themselves more, while at the same time just kind of rubber stamping all these cookie cutter tracks into the circuit. And we can add, like we have a shortage of short tracks or road courses or, just strangely shaped tracks out there that could fit into the NASCAR paradigm very easily. But it's not exactly the kind of scenario that they want to work with right now. I mean, which race? I mean, I personally think that the July Pocono race is probably the next one on the chopping block. Even though certainly much has been mentioned before about the recent purchase of New Hampshire last year, but that would be my guess for the replacement there.
Well, there are a lot of fans that aren't a big fan of Pocono, but certainly I'm a very big fan of Pocono. It's been one of my favorite tracks all along. I would not like to see a Pocono race get pulled from the schedule. If it was my way, I would have maybe one of the New Hampshire races dropped. But I guess it's not really in our hands. It's all up to NASCAR and Bruton Smith. Same guys who took away tracks like North Wilkesboro and took away dates from Rockingham and Darlington, and just it's a dilemma that a lot of fans are kind of getting fed up with. And as a matter of fact, we want to hear your opinion on this, listeners, is this week's question of the week. What is your opinion about the whole Kentucky Speedway controversy? Which track do you think should be taken away in favor for a date at Kentucky, or do you think they shouldn't even go to Kentucky? We want to know what your opinion is. And we had a bit of a dilemma with last week's email. Send your answers to up2speedradio@yahoo.com. That's up, then the number 2, speed radio at hotmail.com, or sorry, at yahoo.com. Almost made another mistake right there. And hey, if some of the more colorful opinions might end up on the air. And Brock, that brings us to last week's question of the week. We had asked our listeners who was going to win the Sprint Cup Best Buy 400 at Dover, and I believe we got, of all of our emails that we received, I believe only one of our listeners got the correct answer.
Well, certainly. I mean, Tommy Bailey actually was the winning person on that list there. He correctly picked Kyle Busch very enthusiastically, I might mention, in his email response. And certainly not the Kyle Busch not being the most popular winner. That would perhaps account to the fact that not many people picked him. But congratulations, Mr. Bailey. We don't have any, unfortunately, we don't have any bobbleheads with our faces on them quite yet, like on Wind Tunnel. But we can give you our kudos, and hopefully that will be sufficient to you for that moment right now. So actually, that brings us to our concluding component here of the show, bringing into the Pocono 500 coming up this weekend. And we got another triple header of racing, including the Cup Series race at Pocono, the Nationwide Series at Nashville, and the Truck Series race at Texas. Should be a nice degree of racing there. As you mentioned, Steve, you're a big fan of Pocono, so I can tell you're probably psyched right now, aren't you?
Oh, I'm always up for Pocono. Pocono is always one of the great tracks. A lot of people think it's boring, but I think it's one of the more exciting tracks on the circuit. And my pick for this weekend's race, I'm not sure how much time we have left here, but I'm going to say for this weekend's race, Carl Edwards. He seems to be really good on the big tracks, and Pocono has been a track he's been good on in the past. I'm picking Carl Edwards to win this week's Pocono 500.
Well, Carl Edwards looks like a good pick, and I mean, there's a lot of competitive teams here. I mean, certainly that I'd be interested to see if Denny Hamlin could continue his streak of good runs at Pocono. That just the rain and kind of cut short last June when that whole incident happened there. As for a pick for this week, I'm not entirely, again, I mean, I guess I'm repeating myself from last week in that I'm not entirely certain. Last week, for the record, I picked Tony Stewart for the win in the Dover race, and thankfully changed my pick to Greg Biffle by that Thursday, which amounted to a pretty good point swing there afterwards. But I'm not entirely sure about who to pick on this one still.